Hello and welcome to the round so far for round 17, brought to you by Amy. I'm Xander McGuire and I'm joined by Kate McCarthy as always. We start with the big story tonight, which devastatingly is a heartbreak story up at the Gabba. Sam Powell-Pepper did his right ACL last year, and it appears, well, Ken Hinkley told us in his post-match press conference that they believe he's now done his left ACL, Kate.
Yeah, it's devastating scenes really for a guy who fought back through, obviously you said, Xander, his other knee previously, but classic ACL mechanism, just change of direction, had that foot planted a long way out of his hips. But this is all about the human element of football, and it's devastating news for Sam Powell-Pepper, for the Port Adelaide Football Club, and mostly also Ken Hinkley. He was very raw and emotional in his post-game press conference. He had this to say about it.
It's really, really sad. You know, when I think about that, it gets a bit sadder for me because it's my last game of coaching Sam, and he's been such a great player for me. It's really difficult when you have someone that you really care about see that happen to him now for the second time on the other leg. For all those people who think they get paid too much or they don't work hard enough, or it's such a great opportunity for them. Have a look at that boy tonight and have a look at how he feels. I mean, he's had a great week. He's had a new baby, him and Briar and the family, and he has to deal with that.
A bit of context from Ken Hinkley on what this means in the grand scheme of Sam Powell-Pepper's life and just what he means to that football club. So really devastating. He was having a game too. 2 goals, 16 touches from what was eventually 58% time on ground. So terrible news for Port Adelaide there. It was Brisbane that triumphed, and a large part of it was because of this man, Zack Bailey, who is our Saturday star. What a game. He could just turn it on. He turns a game in a moment, Zack Bailey, just like tonight.
He does, and this game was largely pretty even across the board. You look at most of the stats and not a whole lot stands out, and the difference for me in this game was the man, Zack Bailey. 26 disposals, he had 12 score involvements, ended up kicking 5 goals as well, and you're right, Xander, he can turn it on, he can get a split second of difference between him and his opponent and he's gone, and his ability to finish and finish well looked really good up there at the Gabba tonight, and he was the Saturday star and he made the difference.
I remember Scott Pendlebury saying post the 2023 grand final that he was the one player in the Brisbane side that he knew could tear the game apart at any given moment if he could get on a run, and that's exactly why, because he can do things like that. To an uglier moment from the night, Dane Zorko caught one to the ribs from Hugh Jackson, the Port Adelaide player here. Talk us through this, Kate. It's not something you like to see at any level in the game.
No, it's not. I think just Zorko's down, he earned himself a free kick for high contact, and then Jackson, who's in his second game of footy, came across and just dropped the knee into him. So not something that you want to see, Xander, and a pretty dirty act really in the context of it. Down the bottom of the pack, pretty defenceless, and yeah, decided to just drop his knees into him, which isn't something that we want to see.
Might find himself a little bit lighter in the pocket, Hugh Jackson there. Brisbane though, 2 consecutive wins, and were criticised, I guess, through the mid-season patch of this year, just given the teams that they had lost to, the form that they'd put on the plate. But it seems like they're improving. I mean, This is an improved side.
Well, it's definitely an improved side. You say that, they're sitting second on the ladder and they will finish the round in second. But their ability, I think, pre-bye to get the win, it was a very impressive win over Geelong. I think before that, and then post-bye against Port Adelaide tonight, their ability to get their forward half game going has been what has improved their ability to hit the scoreboard. We saw Zack Bailey, he started firing. A lot of their mids hit the scoreboard this evening. Yep. Charlie Cameron kicked 3, so they are in a very good position, sitting second on the ladder, as I said. But their next 4, they've got Carlton, the Bulldogs, the Suns and the Pies, so a very important 4 weeks coming up for the Brisbane Lions. 20-point win for Hawthorn over St Kilda at Marvel Stadium tonight, and this game probably went about as you'd expect. Saints were probably in the fight up until around half-time, then Hawthorn kept them at that 20-point margin for the rest of the game. But 2 headline acts out of this. One was the return of the skipper James Sicily, who was sort of in it and did what he needed to do without setting the world on fire, and Josh Battle playing against his old side. Yeah, the story around Sicily, not so much what he did, but the fact that he's back out there on the park, and he is a big key cog, obviously the captain of the club, and that man, Battle playing against his old club. He got the boos, as you'd expect, coming up against your old club, and his ability to really make an impact. Some of his ball use, which we'll see coming up in a minute, his ability to impact in the air, but then feed the ball out of the back half. That's why they got him. Beautiful ball use from Josh Battle, and you see him, you see Barras down there as well, and now Sicily back, as well as Jarman Impey, Carl Amon as well. Their ball use and their ability to defend is only going to get better and better with the addition of James Sicily back in this side.
Another great storyline that's been emerging over the last 3 to 4 weeks is Max Hall at St Kilda, and what a great story he is. He was dropped from Box Hill's preliminary final side in 2023, and his VFL career appeared at a crossroads. He got back over the summer, got himself picked up in the mid-season draft in 2024, and he's just setting the world on fire at St Kilda over the last few weeks.
He is, and the last few weeks of his game have been extremely impressive, and tonight even more impressive. So he had the 27 disposals. He impacted all over the ground, 13 of those contested, 9 score involvements, over 580 metres gained. He had 5 clearances to go with his 3 goals as well. So having impact all around the ground, and if you're not familiar with the name, watch him over the next few weeks, because he's someone that is really impacting all across the ground for the St Kilda Football Club.
From a Saint in his 16th game to a Saint in his 2nd game, Alex Tauru, one of the most hyped picks out of last year's draft. This moment was his moment tonight, and he's been showing a few glimpses of what he can be in the future.
Yeah, well, last week he had 14 spoils, so he decided this week that he'd just go back and clunk him, and he's very impressive. They call him the Flying Viking, and you can absolutely see why in his 2nd game. That was in the forward half. He played mostly in the defensive half last week, so the future is bright. You add Max Hall into that, as well as Nasiah Wanganeen-Miller, someone that they need to keep at this football club. He had the 43 disposals tonight. 33 of those were kicks, so sometimes you see players accumulate a whole lot and not have a whole lot of impact on the game. That's not what Nasiah Wanganeen-Miller is all about. Over 1,000 metres gained, 11 score involvements. So his bargaining power now at St Kilda or with other clubs is just increasing.
Gold Coast today got the job done over Essendon to the tune of 41 points. It's their 10th win for the season. The most they've ever had in a season was 11 as well. So this is shaping to be the best year that the Gold Coast Suns have ever had. Essendon remained in the fight probably until the last quarter, and that's when the Suns showed some real maturity on the road that they lacked in the last couple of years.
Yeah, they kicked 6 goals, 3 to just the 1 behind for Essendon in the 4th quarter. But as you said, Essendon were pretty impressive for mine. Their ability to compete, to pressure the Gold Coast Suns. They previously have played this year a pretty uncontested brand of footy, but they rolled up the sleeves and took it to the Gold Coast Suns when they had the opportunity to. Joel Jeffrey was really impressive for mine. He had the 32 disposals, 10 marks, 740 metres gained, and then that man on screen, Noah Anderson, just keeps getting better and better. I think Jeffrey, we've spoken about a lot probably on this show and all across football media, the inclusions of Rioli and Noble. Yep. I think Joel Jeffrey showed this evening that he is up to that role, and he's someone that can impact off the halfback just as well as Rioli and Noble can. 41
points is tough, but as an Essendon fan, you're probably looking at that. Nate Caddy was great, Isaac Kako was great, Archer May was great, but there's also the experienced guys that were back in the role that they should be, which brings us to your launch zone for this week.
Yes, this is my launch zone, and something that I feel quite strongly about. Zack Merrett is a midfielder. Stay in the midfield, Zack Merrett, because the first 4 weeks of the season this year, he was arguably the best mid, the most impactful mid in the competition. Then for some reason, he's floated back to play mid-defence. Started in the defensive line for a number of those games in between, but this afternoon I am happy to say he was back in the midfield. He had 40 disposals, he had 12 clearances, 9 score involvements, 6 marks and a tackle. I don't know what more you need to put on your resume to say that you are the prime midfielder at that club, and he needs to stay in the midfield, Xander.
To a bit more of a controversial moment from the game this afternoon, the AFL put umpire contact back on the agenda at the start of the week, reminding clubs that if players make significant contact with an umpire, they can be rubbed out. And if you're a repeat offender, then watch out. You could be on your way to a trip to the tribunal. Nate Caddy made accidental contact with an umpire, and Brad Scott was pretty scathing on a potential ban or sort of fine, any sort of sanction for him, and just in general the way that umpires are positioning themselves on the ground.
I've lost count the number of times I've approached the AFL about moving the umpires out of the corridor. They sprint into the corridor and they stay there, and that's clearly where we want to get the ball. And even when I was at the AFL, I tried to move them out of the corridor and they still wouldn't move out of the corridor. So, you know, it took the wind out of Nate Caddy. It took 15 minutes to get him going again. So, you know, whose fault is it? Certainly not Nate Caddy's. And particularly given that we've put this on the agenda.
Now, I expect Nate Caddy will be cleared. I don't think he's got anything to answer there for. It was a genuine accident with no eye contact made between Caddy and the umpire. As you can see in this behind the goals vision, they just simply bump into each other. The umpire sort of makes a late charge toward the contest there, and Caddy's got no idea that he's coming. So I wouldn't expect there to be any hoo-ha over that. The one that could get a little bit of attention, more so in the coming weeks, is Matt Rowell, because he's one that is a repeat offender. He's been done 4 times over the last 2 years for umpire contact, and it's more the way that he's handling it and bringing it into his game tactically here, Kate, that could be an issue.
Yeah, for me, I don't have a problem with it. I know that he's probably flirting with the line here only because of his previous fines and the threat of a suspension being floated from the AFL during the week. And I don't think it's really any necessity for Matt Rowell to change the way that he plays, because that is the space behind the stoppage, is where the umpire is. I understand the need to protect the umpires. I think there is times, though, where he identifies that as a space. He wants to work off potential taggers or opponents. The problem for me is there's a couple of those clips where he does get pretty close to the line.
Yep.
And I think he's going to have to wear, I know Damien Hardwick was pretty up in arms during the week around if he does get suspended and what that could mean. If the warning's been sort of put forward to clubs and that continues and he does make contact with the umpire, he's going to have to wear the consequences, because that's what they've decided to continue on with. It's a bit of a bet each way. So if he's willing to use it as an advantage, he's also got to probably be willing to wear the consequences if he doesn't quite get it right.
Well, I think he's the prime candidate for that. And to be honest, I was shocked to see him still integrated into his game so much like he did during the game today. And I think he is the player that if he does make contact accidentally, if he gets it just an inch off, then he could be on his way to the tribunal for what would be a fascinating case to see how it pans out.
I think you could watch probably, though, a lot of contests and a lot of centre bounce clearance. And the reason we are watching Matt Rowell so closely is because there has been conversation around it. I would argue you could probably watch a whole lot of teams, though, and there would be players that sit behind the umpire and use it like that. Bailey Smith does it a little bit. We've seen some contact with the umpire from him. There's other players. Jack McRae's had 3 incidents as well. So I wouldn't argue he's the only player, but we are focusing on him because of the noise that's been made.
Now, I said before, 10 wins for the Gold Coast Suns, never had more than 11. Imagine, Kate, if they could notch number 11 on their first Friday night game at Gold Coast, People's First Stadium, against the ladder leaders.
This is huge. It's been sold out for weeks. It's a great decision to have this game at People's First Stadium on a Friday night against Collingwood. Damien Hardwick years ago referred to this month as Big Boy Month. Well, Friday night is Big Boy Night, because they need to get this win. They need to show at least they are very competitive against the Collingwood Football Club, and it's a huge stage for them, and they've earned the right to play in primetime fixtures. So let's see how the game pans out. I couldn't be more excited for it, Xander.
Let's go down to the Cattery, where they put this game to bed pretty early. The Cats 72-point win over Richmond down there, and Jeremy Cameron once again the headline act. A huge career achievement for him, hitting goal number 700, but it's indicative of the way that he's been playing probably since about round 5, Kate.
It is. Early in the season, there was questions around whether he was maybe carrying an injury. In saying that, he was still hitting the scoreboard in those games, but his last sort of month and a half of football has been electric. His ability to score out of situations where he pops up, hits the scoreboard constantly, but joining the 700 club, that is an elite club to join, and congratulations to Jeremy Cameron. Also, obviously, leading the Coleman as well this year, and you'd argue he's almost got a hand on that by now, the way that he's kicking big bags of goals week in, week out. He's the in-form forward of the competition.
Bailey Smith was laid out with illness before the game, and you thought maybe this gives a bit of an edge to Richmond. They lose their X-Factor, the Cats, but unfortunately the Tigers lost their X-Factor within 2 minutes. Sam Lawler, pick number 1 in the draft, does his hamstring. 2 minutes into his return game as well, his first game since round 11, and it's the same hammy that he did last time. His 3rd hamstring in 12 months as well, given he did one in his draft year.
Yeah, this is very disappointing for the man that's been so anticipated this year. He's given us glimpses of what he could do, but repeat soft tissue injuries now through his draft year and then through his first year of AFL football. It's pretty disappointing for him and not something that we want to be seeing.
Given the pain, it looks like it's more significant than just a strain. If you're managing a guy like Sam Lawler, the future of the club, do you try and get him back out on the track, or do you maybe put him on ice for the rest of the year?
I think you look at the prospects of what you've got to get out of him. I think you're getting more out of him in the long term than you are for the remainder of this season. Not to say that if he's right to go, you wouldn't play him. Obviously, the more football he plays, the better it is in his short term. But for me, I'd be taking all precautions possible, get every opinion you can to see if there's any point in him sort of taking the field this year to get anything out of it for me.
Let's go to the Amy Clangers now, where we've had a few mares from over the weekend. We'll start with one from today's game, Kate.
Yeah, well, he got done with the offie, really. It just spun straight past the outside of the pad, and Mac Andrews got clean bowled and that's gone through for a goal. I am glad, though, that Daniel Rioli, his teammate, could see the funny side of it, and so could Brad Scott.
I don't think Dimmer saw the funny side of it either. Another coach's box moment here. Ken, I don't know what he's doing there. You had a bit of a comparison.
Well, I think he's gone to Bevo's dentist there. He's got the chompers in, but this one's down at Geelong. Stevie J. Love the bloke, thinks he can pay for everything with his Norm Smith. Why shouldn't he be able to?
Absolutely, and we saw this up close and personal. Richo's grabbed the hammy there, but then he's taken a divot out of the MCG. No one's kicked more goals on that ground than Richo, but he's had a hair there, and it reminded me of this. I mean, they wonder why Collingwood had to move from Vic Park, because the great man there has taken an absolute divot out of it, and he's smashed the Prada Sunnies to oblivion there as well. So shocking day for him, shocking night for Richo as well. But look, we'll improve his mood if he's watching over in Portugal right now. We'll go to Friday night footy, where the Pies absolutely smashed the Blues in front of what was actually a Carlton home crowd, but was probably 75% Pies, to be honest. And we'll go to the third quarter, because the Blues remained in touching distance for most of the first half, and then it got ugly.
Yeah, they did, and it was the highest scoring quarter of the season, this third quarter, for the Magpies. 8 goals for, so they scored 52 points, but McStay kicked 4. He's never kicked more than 3 for Collingwood. Elliott, he kicked 4 as well. Takes his season tally to a career best of 41. Career best, Xander, when there's still 7 games plus finals remaining for him. Some beautiful finishing in front of the sticks. But Jamie Elliott, he just seems to be getting better and better. He kicked 39 in 2023. That was playing all 24 games as well. So he's going to well and truly set himself a new personal best and hit some lofty heights for 2025.
Speaking of veterans playing good footy, this is maybe one that was considered more against the odds. Tom Mitchell in for his first game since Anzac Day last year. And I think he proved that he really has a purpose to play in this side, despite a number of fans thinking that maybe others had gone past him.
Yeah, and I think if you notice in these clips, we're so accustomed to him being the one at the bottom of the pack, giving the handball out to runners. And a couple of these clips, it just shows the importance of it. So he's able to there give it to Nick Dacos, who's now running away from that stoppage. Previously, it was Pendlebury there, it's Lipinski. His role and his ability to give the ball to others in a better space is something that is going to be very vital. I think they'd be really impressed. He said post-game that it felt like it was debut again because it was so long since he'd played football. So a great story, but I think there's more than a great story in it as well, because he added some serious value to that team with his ability to get the ball to the outside runners. Even
with guys like Sidebottom and McCreary went through the midfield, they come back. You still think Tom Mitchell has a space in that in September?
Well, you think Bo McCreary comes back in, Steele Sidebottom comes back in. If they're not getting the ball in and under and they're getting the ball on the outside, they're far more damaging. Yep. So Tom Mitchell definitely has a role to play in that.
Now to Michael Voss, you said on this show last week that if they suffered another loss like they did to Port Adelaide, where they got done by 10 goals and showed no effort, then he could be in some real trouble. And Michael Voss himself conceded that after the game, that was the main thing. You know, he said you can cop skill errors going forward, as they have for a number of years now, but it was the effort that really hurt. Where does this leave Michael Voss in the grand scheme of things? I
think the pressure on him obviously is not going to get any easier with what they dished out on Friday night. I think he said they let the club down. It's, for me, the microscope needs to be a little bit more on the players, because you can guarantee that they were built up for that game. They wanted to pressure the opposition, but there was no response, really. There was very little given at the start of the game. If that's me and I'm going out as a Carlton Football Club player, the first opportunity I have to do something that inspires my teammates, or to show that I'm here to show Collingwood that we're here to play, that's what I'm doing. And I felt like there were very few of those acts in the first 5 or 10 minutes of that game, which struggled to set the tone. And that might be me sort of coming from a different era or a different time where that was how you showed that you were in a game, but there was very little of that for me for Carlton, and that's on the players. That's not on the coaching staff. That's on the players to put their head over the footy, to win their one-on-ones, to smash their opponent if they have the opportunity to, and none of that was on display on Friday night.
A lot of soul-searching at the Blues. Charlie Curnow promised that they'd be a different unit next week, so
it should have been a different unit this week. That's what we should have had. That's what we were expecting. Yep. It wasn't there.
So we'll wait and see on that. To the other Friday night game, where West Coast and GWS came up against each other, and it was a pretty one-sided affair. And there was one young gun that you want to point out, Kate, from this clash, who's just having a career best year.
Yeah, it's Finn Callaghan, and his ability in the last sort of month of football. He had a brilliant opening round against Collingwood, and then sort of had a few shoulder issues. But since coming back from that, he has been at his dynamic best. His ability to do this, he's a true metres gain player, but his ability to gain ground, hit the scoreboard, forward, have plenty of the footy, but have plenty of impact on the game as well. 37 disposals, 9 score involvements, 6 clearances, 6 bounces as well, and 854 metres gain. And that takes me to the 2021 draft. So this is the top 4 picks. Couldn't really argue that anyone got any of these picks wrong. Obviously, unfortunately for North Melbourne, Jason Horne-Francis is now wearing a Port Adelaide jumper, but within their own right, these 4 players have been extremely valuable to their club, and the one that does fly under the radar is the man we're talking about, Finn Callaghan. But for me, this year, and especially this last month, he has been as impactful, if not more impactful, than most of those players that are standing there beside him.
You feel like if Finn Callaghan played for a big Victorian club that maybe he would get more plaudits, but it's good that you're giving them to him right now. Just staying on that game, the Friday night doubleheader. You know, a couple of different time slots, but a lot of overlay. What did you make of them?
Yeah, not a fan of it, Xander, and not a fan for a couple of reasons. The doubleheader that we had on Friday night is arguably one of the biggest rounds of football, the games of football that we have outside of the marquee matchups, obviously. Carlton and Collingwood. Then you've got West Coast and GWS starting at 8:20. The next one that we have coming up in round 20 is Essendon Bulldogs into the Giants and Sydney. So that's 2 Sydney clubs that are featuring in them. We are having a round 0 that's dedicated to growing football in the northern states, yet you have the marquee matchup of the Battle of the Bridge playing at 7:50 on a Friday night up against Essendon and the Bulldogs. How is that helping to grow the game? If we need a whole round to help grow the game up there, why are we fixturing like this? I'm not a fan of it. And then you've got another northern state, Brisbane and Fremantle, in round 23, starting at 8:20 at Optus Stadium. I don't think there's a need for double headers on Friday night, and if they are, I don't think they're the matchups we should be going to if we're trying to grow the game.
Let's go to Thursday night footy now, where North Melbourne took on the Bulldogs in their centenary match, and they made a fist of it as well until the latter stages of the game where the Bulldogs just took them to town. But again, it just goes to show that the class of the Bulldogs list is probably a grade above, and a large part of that is because of Sam Darcy and Aaron Norton.
Yeah, and that act there from Sam Darcy, he had a tough night, especially in the first sort of 3 quarters. He was well held. He'd fought hard against his opponent, but his competitiveness to just keep going. And I want to highlight the importance of both of them. So you see Aaron Norton, the one with the arrow, Sam Darcy highlighted. Guess who has 2 defenders? Of course, it's Sam Darcy. Who does that open up the opportunity for? Aaron Norton. We'll see again here. Like hedging their bets, the North Melbourne defenders, because they want to make sure that never anyone is one out with Sam Darcy. Well, the beneficiary is Aaron Norton, and their ability to combine again for 9 goals on Thursday night, was extremely impressive. And as a 1-2 punch, they're becoming very valuable. Aaron Norton questioned at times during this season. To have this opportunity and to be able to hit the scoreboard, well, he's starting to really learn how his role can be utilised with Sam Darcy in the same forward line.
Big talking point out of this was how a head knock to Tristan Cherry was handled by North Melbourne doctors and also by the AFL. The AFL will adjudicate that come Monday morning for their medical meeting. But he goes down to the ground and he looks like he's copped a significant blow to the head. He looks dazed, a bit confused. Clarko clearly thinks he's in trouble as well. He wasn't taken off the ground. And this becomes a talking point because the AFL has given the ARC the opportunity to now stop games for this very purpose, to get guys off the field if they're in trouble. It took him about 5 or 6 minutes. He was eventually taken off. He passed the concussion test, but it wasn't a great look to see him shrug everything off, not really be checked immediately for a serious concussion test and play on despite being dazed.
Yeah, I think the optics of it probably looked worse when 2 of his opponents were asking him if he was all right. So Tim English at a stoppage further down was shown on camera to be asking if he was okay, and then Tom Liberatore also checked in on him. So for that to happen, and then the minute that he does rotate, he goes down into the rooms for a head injury assessment. That's probably the bit for me that needs to just tidy up. I understand the doctors have their discretion. They ask questions, they work it out, and I'm sure it will be ticked off as it comes under the microscope from the AFL, but probably just the optics of it, where we are with head knocks and concussions, probably just needs to tidy up a little bit.
Let's go to the rest of the round now. We've had 7 games already, so only the 2 left. Sydney and Freo, which I guess that'll be a hotly contested matchup, but I think the turf at the SCG will be probably under more of a microscope. And then we've got Adelaide and Melbourne at the Adelaide Oval. So 2 games that could probably go either way in what has been a round of blowouts so far. Have you got an early tip for either of those?
I think all eyes for me are going to be on Sydney, Fremantle, obviously Turfgate, but the game itself is huge. It sort of baffles me that the Fremantle are 6-0 and going into that game as outsiders, but then I also look at it and think Sydney, the last 2 weeks with all their stars back, have been much much improved. So I'm going to tip Sydney, but it's tentative and it's going against everything that I know because Freo are 6-0 and are probably the informed team of the comp. But I think Sydney could probably take a scalp here.
And Crows probably the favourites over at Adelaide as well. Well, that's been the round so far. Thank you so much for joining Kate and I. We'll catch you next week for all the action out of round 18.